Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we'll talk about the recording and mixing of the drums. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. We recorded the drums in our rehearsal room on my Pearl Vision drum set, which has one bass drum, one snare drum, 6 toms mounted on a rack, a hi-hat, a ride cymbal and several crash cymbals. I wanted the drums to sound heavy, so I decided to use the mics on the bass drum, on snare drum, on the toms, on the hi-hat, on the ride cymbal and overheads. Let's see what microphones I used. For inside the bass drum I used the Sennheiser E901 and in front of the bass drum I used the Sennheiser E6022. For the snare bottom I used the Shure Beta 58A and for the snare top a Sennheiser E904, which is a little microphone you can clip directly to the snare drum. For the toms I used the Sennheiser E604, which is also a microphone you can clip directly to the tom. And for the hi-hat and the ride I each used a Shure SM57. And for the overheads I used a matched pair of NT5s made by Rode. So these are 14 microphones, 14 drum tracks. Before I bought all the microphones I read a really helpful test on the internet made by a recording magazine where they compared hundreds of microphones on different drum parts, and they uploaded all the samples they recorded with the microphones, so I could choose between several microphones and I could listen to them and compare them. So I always chose the microphone which sounded good enough for me but was still affordable. In order to get so many signals into the DAW, I needed an audio interface which has enough inputs. So I bought the Focusrite Scarlett 18i20 in the second generation, which has 8 preamps, and I also bought an Focusrite Scarlett Octo Pre, which has another 8 preamps, and you can link both interfaces, so you have 16 inputs in total. Okay, so maybe let's listen to the song. This is Happy Dance Club. Happy Dance Club, you can listen to it, to the full song here on YouTube. Let's start the song.
Give me money, give me gas, like Robert off the spills, to shoot it, yes. Provide me heavy, engine toys, see my exhausting fumes turn green to gray. Just lay back and enjoy your bloody will. Twisted.
So that's the song. Now let's listen to the drum sound without any processing. The only things I did was I edited all the drum tracks, so I cut out all the signals I didn't use, I didn't need. And I positioned all the drum tracks in the panorama. You can see that here. The bass drum and snare drum are always in the center, and I positioned all the toms from right to left in the panorama. The hi-hat and the ride are both cut hard right, panned hard right and hard left. And I bounced the 2 stereo microphones into a stereo channel. So let's listen to the dry drum signals. also adjusted the gain so that all the signals have the same level, about minus 12 to minus 18 dB. So now let's listen to the drum sound with phase correction. So you can hear the sound is at once sounds better. There's more bass in the bass drum. The signals the sound is fuller. So what I did here is I corrected the phases. The problem is that when you have several microphones, for example, you hit the bass drum and you hear the sound on the bass drum microphones, and you hear them also in the overhead microphones, but they don't have the same distance to the bass drum, so the sound waves don't meet the microphones, all the microphones at the same time. So this is why you have phase differences, and this leads to cancellation of certain frequencies with the sound waves. So the sound is, when you add all the microphones, all the signals, the sound suddenly gets thinner and it lacks fullness. I don't know how to call that. So that was the first thing I did to get a better drum sound at once with only the phase correction. Now let's listen to that again without phase correction. And with phase correction. So, and that's the base from where I started to mix the drums. Now let's listen to the final drum sound. Let's compare it again to the phase corrected drums. So this is much more heavy. Okay, so let's see what I did. Okay, now let's see how I mixed the drums. First, I routed all the drum tracks into group channels. For example, both bass drum channels go right into the bass drum group channel, the snare drum tracks go into the snare drum channel, and so on. And all these group channels are routed to the drum channel, and this goes into the master channel. So let's see what I did to the bass drum. First, I cut out a little bit of the low frequencies because there were too much of the low frequencies with two microphones. Then I added a transit master to get more of the hits and less of the sustain. And I added some saturation after that, and then compressed the signal with a CLA 76 compressor, which is a really fast compressor and perfect for drums. I did the same thing to the front microphone track, but I also cut out all the high frequencies because I didn't need them on this track. I already had them on the inside bass drum track. So now let's see what I did to the snare drum. First I gated the signal. So in order to get rid of all the signals, I didn't need, where the snare drum wasn't hit. I cut out all the frequencies that sounded bad, and a little bit of the low frequencies. I had many troubles in the beginning with the snare drum because there was too much sound of the cymbals, especially of the hi-hat on the snare microphones. So I found a little trick in the internet to cut them out with a dynamic EQ. So I added another EQ to boost some of the high frequencies. Then I again put in a saturation plugin, then a transient master to get more of the hits and less of the sustain, and compress the signal. And in the end, I added the SSL channel to form the sound, to get a nice warm sound and to compress it again. So let's see what I did to the snare bottom channel. Also, I cut out all the frequencies I didn't need that sounded bad. I boosted some of the frequencies to get the snare drum bottom mic fit better in the mix. Again, I added some saturation, transient master, SSL channel, and in this case a limiter to avoid loud drum hits. Okay, now let's see what I did to the toms. I treated them all the same way, so let's see what I did to this one. Again, I cut out all the frequencies that sounded bad. I boosted the high end, and I cut out some of the low frequencies. I didn't like the tuning of the drums, of the toms, so I started with the Torque plugin by Waves, where you can tune, fine-tune the toms again. So I got them a little bit lower to sound better. Then again, a transient master, SSL channel, and a limiter to avoid too loud drum hits. Okay, this is what I did to the toms. There's nothing special on the hi-hat. I cut out all the frequencies that sounded bad, and I added some SSL EQ to form the sound, as well as on the right track, the right cymbal. I cut out the frequencies I didn't need. I cut out more frequencies with the dynamic EQ because there was a ringing sound that I didn't like. And added then again SSL EQ to form the sound. And on the stereo overhead track I did nothing. I processed them in the group channel. Okay, so that's each drum track. And I did more processing on the group channels. I again cut out all the frequencies that sounded bad when both microphones were mixed together, formed the sound again with the SSL channel, with a multi-band compressor, and with an EQ. I did this to all the group channels and as well as to the drum channel, where I also cut out the frequencies that sounded bad when all the microphones, all the group channels were mixed together. And that's it, I think. Maybe I would like to show you one trick that was cool. I routed the bass drum, the snare drum, and I think the toms into an FX channel with a lot of compression, and I added that to the signal, and that gave the toms, the snare drum, and the bass drum more heaviness, and it sounded more rough. So this is called parallel compression, or maybe you can find it under New York compression. That's a really cool thing, and the drums at once sound better. Some of the tracks I sent to a reverb channel, like the snare and the toms. Especially the toms I had to send to a reverb channel because I cut I cut them really hard, so a lot of the sustain was gone, and I added them by I added the sustain again by a reverb. I routed all the drum signals into drums reverb because I didn't use a room microphone to get a more natural drum sound. So I did this in the mix with drum reverb to simulate a room. So, and I think that's it. This was the recording and mixing of the drums. Thank you for watching. I hope you did enjoy that, and see you next time. Bye.